In Alien Earth, when our girl Wendy saw the Xenomorph attack her human brother, her first instinct was to save him, and the next was to kill the Xenomorph. Now, while it might seem like a doable job for a hybrid to slay a Xeno without any tech or weapons, humans like you and I would soil their pants. With the exception of Arnold Schwarzenegger, perhaps. I mean, that man took down a predator, so taking down a Xeno would be easy. So it all boils down to finding ways to exterminate these biomechanical killing machines. While predators use their uber-cool, primitive-looking technology, humans use colonial marines to get the job done. And sometimes we send Ellen Ripley. But what about a suit that can take care of all this? And that's where our Exo-Suit from Alien's Berserker comes into play. That's exactly what we're going to explore today, but before I begin, please consider hitting those like and subscribe buttons. Those two small clicks from you help us tremendously in bringing you more of these marvelous videos. And now, let's begin. Berserker Anti-Xeno Suit. The colonial marines in the Aliens universe have a reputation for being the toughest fighters humanity can field. These men and women train to survive the emptiness of space, unknown planets, and hostile environments for long stretches, and on most missions they can handle themselves against whatever comes their way. The problem is that xenomorphs are not a normal threat. In open ground with heavy firepower, marines stand a chance, but inside a cramped hive or a dark spacecraft corridor, their usual tactics collapse like a house of cards facing a super cyclone. That's why the military came up with something more extreme in the form of the Berserker unit. This was essentially a 2-ton suit of armor, hardwired to a human pilot who's fused with the machine. Officially, the pilot is supposed to let the suit do most of the work, almost like the human becomes a passenger while the system fights for them. This is in contrast to the exo-suits that we usually see. Let's take the ones from Pacific Rim, for instance. There, the human pilots control the suit, but the Berserker suit works best when the human lets the suit take absolute control. The idea actually goes back to inspiration from Ripley taking on the Queen in a power loader, which made the brass realize brute force with a human inside could be weaponized. The first Berserker-type designs appeared in Aliens Tribes, where the suits were called MOCs, or Mobile Offensive Exo-Warriors. They packed flamethrowers, electrified prods, grenade launchers, and pulse rifles, modified to burn through alien flesh without letting acid blood melt everything. The Mach 16, named Kicker, proved so effective that Weyland-Yutani later produced their own heavier version, the MAX, or Mobile Assault Exo-Warrior. These new suits weighed over 10 tons, had stronger armor resistant to acid, resistant, not immune, and carried enough weapons to flatten a hive. The catch was that they came with a pretty heavy cost for the pilot. The stress of merging with the suit fried nerves, damaged the body, and usually ended with the operator's death. In Aliens Berserker, it's not even clear if the pilot volunteered or was forced, but either way, the deal was ugly. Pilots were kept in chemically induced comas between deployments, waking only when combat called. They were pumped with adrenaline cocktails that threw them into a berserk rage, which made them devastating in battle but unpredictable. If sedation failed and they slipped into REM sleep before activation, they could wake in a confused frenzy, and wouldn't differentiate between their fellow marines and xenomorphs while attacking, so they put everyone near them at risk, friend and foe. That's where the Berserker name truly fit. A squad typically ran 3 to 5 members, with one unlucky soul sent as bait to be dragged deeper into the hive. Their only hope was a facehugger-resistant mask and a tracker chip that kept the Berserker from accidentally killing them once the armor went crazy, as it usually did. Once the bait found the Queen's chamber, the suit would tear through the walls and drones alike to reach her. If things still went sideways, the team usually planted nukes as a last resort. Despite the horrors, the Berserker worked. A single Max could carve a bloody trail through a hive and even challenge a Queen head-on, but the human cost meant they never became standard issue. The stories in Aliens Tribes and Aliens Berserker underlined one very common but disturbing theme in the Alien franchise. You see, corporations and militaries keep throwing human bodies into meat grinders, whether it's to collect specimens from faraway moons like in Alien Earth, or win a war like in the comics. Now you may ask why they didn't just automate the suits or hand over control to AI or synthetics, but the bleak answer and the fact of the matter is that human suffering fits the Alien universe perfectly. The franchise is about human tragedy as much as it is about xenomorphs and extraterrestrial threats. Such suffering is more in line with the Alien universe's brand of horror. But I digress. Speaking about the bait as I was earlier, if you think about it, being bait might be the worst gig in the Corps. March into a hive, pretend to be helpless, wait for something with 2 sets of jaws to drag you home, then pray your tracker keeps you safe when a 10-ton armored rage machine blasts its way through the walls. It's messed up, but that's the point. The Berserker is as much about human sacrifice as it is about firepower, and that makes it one of the darker, more fascinating inventions in the extended Alien lore. But you know what? This is far from the only Xenomorph suit in the franchise. Since you've reached this point in the video, I'm sure you'd be interested in knowing about a few other exosuits, so let's check them out. Z-110 Acid Neutralizing Combat Wardrobe, the anti-Xenomorph suit from Aliens Genocide. After humanity clawed its way back from the brink, finally beating back the Xenomorphs on Earth, there was a brief moment where things looked happier. To celebrate, the Goodwill Games were held in Baghdad as a symbol of global unity after all the recent mess. Oh yeah, there was this huge Xenomorph attack on Earth not long ago, so that's the backdrop I'm talking about. Anyway, even during this hopeful time, people couldn't leave well enough alone. Some athletes looking for an edge turned to a legal drug called Xeno. Nobody quite understood how dangerous it was. The stuff wasn't your standard booster because it was distilled from royal jelly, the same secretion Xenomorph queens produced to keep their hives thriving. Demand for it skyrocketed, and one man in particular saw dollar signs everywhere. Daniel Grant, head of Neopharm, wasn't content with the millions he already had. He wanted more. Grant pitched Xeno to the colonial marines, claiming it had military potential. In truth, what he wanted was an open door to the motherlode. Yep, the Xenomorph homeworld itself, a place rich with royal jelly beyond imagination. Grant's ambitions birthed one of the boldest expeditions in human history. At the front of it was Major Alex Lee, a decorated Marine haunted by a personal failure, so he was basically dealing with the death of her lover under Alex's command. Lee took the job reluctantly, surrounded by Marines and Grant Corporation scientists, including Grant himself. Their ship, the US Razia, carried them out of hypersleep into the unknown. Grant's arrogance didn't sit well with the Marines, though he somehow managed to strike up an old camaraderie with Corporal Henriksen. Even Lee, hardened as she was, noticed something more complicated beneath his abrasive shell. The trouble was, Grant's team wasn't being honest. Their real plan wasn't just to harvest royal jelly, they wanted to push it further, experimenting with the idea of incubating a chest burster using the jelly itself. In theory, it could give them a controlled, renewable supply of xenomorphs. To the Marines, this wasn't just insane, it was suicidal. Tensions boiled when they discovered the truth, and for a moment it looked like the entire mission would collapse. Luckily for them, the chest burster they were worried about died before it became a bigger threat. Still, the damage was done. Trust had been shattered. At this point, though, they were too far gone to turn back. The mission had to go forward, and Grant had one more trick to play. His newest invention, the Z-110 Acid Neutralizing Combat Wardrobe. The suit had been developed in secret by the Grant Corporation, originally as a way to protect their royal jelly harvesting teams. It was a full-body system designed with one job in mind, neutralizing the corrosive acid blood that made fighting xenomorphs so deadly. Covering a Marine from head to toe, the armor came with a ribbed design and a slick gelatinous lining. Whenever acid blood hit it, the lining activated instantly, breaking the liquid down into a harmless substance with a neutral pH. Instead of the usual nightmare of burning metal and flesh, the acid became about as dangerous as tap water. It wasn't perfect, but compared to anything the Marines had done before, it was revolutionary. Traditional attempts at acid-proof armor had been bulky and heavy, weighing soldiers down until they were more statue than fighter. The Z-110 avoided that trap. It wasn't a powered exoskeleton, but it had an adaptive design that responded to the wearer's movements. Even the helmet had a synchronized tracking system, so the view shifted with the user's line of sight. This was a double-edged sword, though, because the gelatinous lining couldn't be made transparent. The helmet had to rely on a smaller, compact viewer. That viewer became the suit's weak spot, with about a 1 in 5 chance of taking a hit if xenomorphs went for the head. If the viewer broke, the pressurized environment inside collapsed, leaving the Marine exposed. The Z-110 offered more than acid protection. It doubled as a full life support system, capable of sustaining a Marine in a pressurized environment for up to 6 hours. Its power source came from batteries on the back, which also supported easy replacement of armor plates after heavy combat. One of its biggest advantages was that the gelatinous lining regenerated after battle, meaning a Marine didn't need constant resupply. That regeneration made it almost endlessly reusable in the field. To top it off, the Grant Corporation produced Nutrigel, a substance that could be applied to other armor types. Nutrigel was sold in packets that could cover an entire suit and absorb a certain threshold of acid damage. Once that limit was hit, it lost effectiveness, but until then, it offered a layer of protection that standard armor never had. Even with all that, the combat wardrobe had vulnerabilities. The viewer remained the prime target, and exposed areas like helmets without full Nutrigel coverage were still risky. A Marine in a Z-110 wasn't invincible. They were safer, far safer, but the battlefield against xenomorphs didn't allow for perfection. Acid blood still threatened to eat through given enough exposure, and no amount of armor could prepare someone for the chaos of being swarmed by hundreds of aliens at once. That's what brought people to ask the real question. Was this suit actually a game changer? On paper, yes. In practice, it depended entirely on the scale of the battle. In the comics, Marines wearing Z-110 still got overwhelmed, because they weren't just fighting the regular black-shelled Xenomorphs. They were up against the originals plus a new mutation, the red Xenomorphs. And they weren't dealing with a hive or two. They were fighting on the Xenomorph homeworld, a planet crawling with millions of creatures. Against those numbers, no suit in the world was going to guarantee survival. Yet the fact that some Marines survived it all says a lot about how powerful the suits were. Without them, no human would have stood a chance against that level of infestation. In the context of the films, though, the combat wardrobes would have been a problem. The movies often focus on small-scale outbreaks. One alien on a ship or a single hive on a colony. In those scenarios, where tension comes from the fragility of the humans facing the monsters, a near-invincible suit would kill the suspense. If Ripley had worn a Z-110 in the first movie, there'd be no story. One well-equipped Marine could have walked through the corridors, shrugged off the acid, and blasted the creature without much fuss. That's why the combat wardrobe remains stuck in the comics and extended lore. It works as part of a large-scale war when humanity is trying to reclaim worlds and wipe out infestations. It doesn't work for intimate horror stories where survival hinges on fragile equipment and vulnerable bodies. In that way, it almost feels like a symbol of the divide between the two sides of the Alien franchise. That is, the action-heavy comics and novels versus the tense, claustrophobic films. The Z-110 fits in the first camp, but would look out of place in the second. What Grant and his company created was undeniably impressive. It neutralized acid, provided life support, and gave the Marines a fighting chance against impossible odds. At the same time, it reflected the same corporate greed that created the mission in the first place. Grant wasn't designing these suits out of altruism. He wanted a way to protect his investment and keep his royal jelly flowing. That the Marines benefited was almost incidental. In the Alien universe, that tracks perfectly. Human innovation born out of selfish ambition, leading to something incredible, but never without a catch. Marvelous verdict. Do we really need these suits in movies? When you look back at the Alien films, it becomes clear that while the Xenomorphs are terrifying, they're not exactly unbeatable. In the first movie, the Nostromo crew were essentially sitting ducks with no real weapons, which is why the creature picked them off so easily. Ripley's eventual win came down to a bit of resourcefulness and an airlock, not some advanced combat gear. Then James Cameron's sequel changed the game by sending in colonial Marines with serious firepower. Sure, they got overwhelmed by sheer numbers, but in straight fights, the Marines had the upper hand. The movie pretty much proved that with the right weapons and a little preparation, these creatures could be taken down. Even the original film hinted at that when Ripley managed to outsmart the Xenomorph without heavy artillery. So do we really need these super suits on the big screen? Probably not. Dropping in armor that makes Marines practically untouchable would strip away the suspense the franchise thrives on. Half the tension comes from watching humans improvise under pressure, not from them walking in with gear that neutralizes acid blood like it's no big deal. Unless the movie decides to throw the characters into an entire planet overrun with millions of Xenomorphs, the suits would feel like overkill. That kind of story could maybe justify their use, but otherwise they risk turning a nail-biting survival horror into a routine bug hunt. And that would rob Alien of the edge that's kept it alive for decades. That was all in this one, guys. See you in the next one. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.